Hello, everyone, and you're very welcome to this presentation on the Music Project 2027 Award. My name is Tara Bulger, and I'm a member of the Music and Opera team here at the Arts Council. Today, I'm going to take you through the keynotes to do with this award and also some highlights in the guidelines that you need to consider should you wish to make an application to the Music Project. One thing I would stress, however, from the outset is that today is really only a summary of the award and some of the key points to bear in mind. I would stress, please make sure that you consult the full guidelines, which are available on the music page of the Arts Council website. On the funding page, I should say, and you'll see very clearly the Music Project Award. Should you have any questions at all in relation to the guidelines, you can contact the Music and Opera team at the details I'll provide a little later on. So, let's get started. The Music Project Award is now open for applications. The application window opened last on Tuesday, 23rd June. And the application's deadline is 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 23rd of July. What is the Music Project Award 2027? The Music Project Award is an Arts Council funding scheme that supports professional artists and musicians to deliver music projects to audiences. This award is open to projects taking place next year in 2027. It is a one-year award. It is not a multi-annual award. It should be noted that the Music Project Award is highly competitive. We receive many more applications than it's possible for us to fund. For example, in the last round in 2026, 31% of Music Project Award applications were successful. There were 74 applications and 23 applications received funding. A key note here is that musicians working in the area of traditional music should apply to the dedicated awards offered by the Traditional Arts team. Further information can be found on the Traditional Arts webpage on the Arts Council website, where you will also find contact details of my colleagues in the Traditional Arts team who will be able to give you further information. So what are the objectives of the Music Project Award? The objective of the award is to enable professional artists and musicians, individual artists, groups of artists or organisations to bring innovative, ambitious and high-quality music projects to audiences. There are 3 strands to the Music Project Award for 2027 and each strand has its own objectives. You can only apply for one strand of the award in this funding round, however. So 2 key notes here. Firstly, there is only one round of the Music Project Award being offered for next year, 2027. And secondly, you cannot apply for more than one project award in any art form or arts practice area in any one round of funding. So, for example, you cannot apply for a Music Project Award and a Music Theatre Award in the same round. Apologies, that should be a Music Theatre Award, Theatre Project Award in the same round. So, the Music Project Award strands. Strand 1, you can apply for any amount up to €40,000. Strand 1 are for projects devised for live attendance performances or performance, possibly extending their public reach through broadcast, online, or other audience channels. For example, a public concert in a venue that might or might not also be recorded for broadcast and or for dissemination on websites, social media, or other platforms. A keynote here is that projects under this strand will have live attendance performance as the primary element in the proposal. Strand 2, you can request for an amount up to €10,000. In Strand 2, these are projects devised exclusively for public dissemination via broadcast, online, or other channels. That is where a musical output is produced for audience, but where a live audience is not involved. Two keynotes here. The first thing is that the projects under this strand will not have live attendance performance as an element in the proposal. And secondly, recording projects without the involvement of a record label or company, for example, self-release recordings, should apply under Strand 2. Strand 3 is for an amount up to €10,000. Strand 3 is specifically for audio recording projects which are devised in association with record companies for dissemination through digital platforms and or through physical copies. First note here is that projects under this strand will not have live attendance performance as an element in the proposal. And second note, recording projects only with the involvement of a record label or record company, that is, not self-release recordings, should apply under this strand. Changes to the Music Project 2027 award. So, a number of things to note here, particularly if you are familiar with the previous rounds of the Music Project Award. This round is the final year that we are running Strands 2 and Strand 3 of the Music Project. The Music Project Award 2028, which will be offered next year, open for applications in 2027, will not include Strands 2 and Strand 3. Therefore, it will not be open to recording projects. We will, however, offer a new recording award in 2027. There will be more information coming on this later this year, beginning of next year. The second change, and one that is very important to note, is that you cannot submit samples of work using streaming platforms that limit access by subscription or sign up in any way. That's either financial sign up or non-financial sign up. So for the avoidance of doubt, we no longer accept links to Spotify. The third change is that we have updated our strategic priorities with an additional priority regarding genres that have been highlighted in the Arts Council music policy. And the final change is that we have used plain language guidelines to update the Music Project Award documents. So, what are the strategic priorities? The Arts Council has identified the following types of projects as strategic priorities for support through the Music Project Award. The first is high quality music projects that engage professional artists of high quality and demonstrate a strong and imaginative approach. The second priority are music projects that show a clear and considered focus on maximising public reach and engagement and on engaging and developing new audiences. Thirdly, music projects from a wide range of music genres and practices, including those genres that have been highlighted in the Arts Council's music policy. These genres include country, popular, electronic, jazz improvised music, and musical theatre. Next priority are projects that involve the creation and or the presentation of new work. Next, the projects that feature performance or recording of historic Irish music. And finally, recording projects of high artistic quality for which self-financing commercial revenue potential is unlikely. So these are priorities that you can consider should you wish to submit an application to the Music Project Award. So who can apply to this award? Well, the Music Project Award is open to individuals, groups of individuals, and to organisations. So in the category of individuals and group of individuals, this award is open to professional artists working in music who are resident or based in the Republic of Ireland. A group of individuals must apply through one lead applicant. In terms of organisations, this award is open to organisations working in music who are based in the Republic of Ireland. It is not open to organisations, however, who are in receipt of strategic funding, Arts Centre partnership funding, or partnership funding from the Arts Council. Key to note here is that you cannot apply to the Music Project Award as both an individual and as part of an organisation. So in other words, you cannot make an application in your own name and also make an application, for example, as an artistic director of a company. So some more information here in relation to professional artists. So who are professional artists? Well, in terms of the art forms applications, professional art for artists are actively pursuing a career as an artist in any art form, and they consider their arts practice to be their main profession or career. This applies even if their work in the arts is not their main source of income or they have other employment. And thirdly, an applicant who is recognised by their peers as a professional practising artist. Some further information then on the Republic of Ireland clause. We may accept applications from applicants who are not resident in the Republic of Ireland. In this case, you must explain in section 2.5 of your application form how your proposal would benefit the arts in the Republic of Ireland. However, we will determine the eligibility of your application based on the explanation you provide. So who cannot apply? In the case of individual applicants, an individual who is in receipt of Arts Grant Funding 2027 from the Arts Council cannot apply. An individual that does not have a demonstrable track record as a professional artist. A full-time undergraduate student, including student in foundation courses or in full-time education during the period that the award is offered in. An individual looking for support towards fees for postgraduate or higher education or study, including unaccredited courses. For example, you cannot apply for a QQI accredited course such as a FETAC certificate, a degree, or a master's degree. And finally, an individual cannot apply if they are looking for support towards work you're doing as part of a formal course, an internship, or volunteer work. As an organisation, who cannot apply? So an organisation currently in receipt of funding under the following Arts Council schemes: strategic funding, Arts Centre partnership funding, Arts Grant Funding 2027, cannot apply directly to the Music Project Award. However, recipients of these schemes are welcome as partners to applicants for project awards, so they are not excluded from being partners in proposals being made by other applicants. Also, an organisation that does not have a track record as a professional organisation cannot apply. And neither can an organisation who is a member of the Council of National Cultural Institutions and directly funded by the Department of Culture, Communications and Sport. They also cannot apply to the Music Project Award. Also to note here in terms of an applicant profile, you cannot apply if you are an agent, manager, management company or consultant who is applying on behalf of an artist or arts organisation. Applications should be submitted by the artists or organisations themselves. So how much can you apply for? Well, as set out at the beginning under the strands, there are 3 strands of funding available according to the strand that you are applying for and according to the scale of your proposal. So under strand 1, the maximum amount you can request is €40,000. Under strand 2, you can request up to €10,000. Under strand 3, you can request up to €10,000. However, you can include additional access costs in your application if they specifically relate to artists and participants with disabilities making work. These costs are separate to the amount that you request for your proposal. So if you want to apply for additional access costs, you should provide information in your application outlining what these costs are. Very important to note that there are costs that you cannot apply for under the Music Project Award. So the first thing to say is that there are a list of costs that do not fit the purpose of the award. and especially those who do not fit that objective of the music project. So please refer to section 1.1, which is the objectives of the award in the guidelines, for more information in relation to the objective of the award, and therefore costs that do not meet that objective cannot be applied for. You also cannot apply for major capital requests for purchasing equipment or improvements to workspaces. Neither can you apply for ongoing core costs. They must be related to the project itself. You can't apply for subscriptions that are unrelated to this proposal. This would include ongoing software licenses. You cannot apply for membership fees of institutions or other organisations. And you cannot apply for costs for formal education. For example, you cannot apply for a QQI accredited course such as FETAC certificate, a degree, or a master's degree. There are also activities that you cannot apply for. So, similar to the costs, activities that do not fit the purpose of the award cannot be applied for. And again, please refer to section 1.1, the objectives of the award in the guidelines, for further information on the objectives and priorities, and therefore the kinds of activities that will not meet with those objectives. Secondly, you cannot apply for activities that are predominantly a part of or adjunct to formal education courses. You cannot apply for activities that are better suited to another Arts Council award. Neither can you apply for activities that are better suited to support from another government agency or public agency. Some examples of this might include Culture Ireland, Screen Ireland, and third level institutions. You also cannot apply for activities that form part of the artistic programme of a national cultural institution or other body directly funded by government for the purpose of music presentation. A key thing to note is that you can't apply for activities that you've already completed or that will start before the 1st of January 2027. Just to remind you that this round of the project award is for projects to be delivered in 2027. You cannot apply for activities by registered charities that are for fundraising for other organisations. Neither can you apply for activities that are for participating in a competition, nor activities that are for profit making. And finally, projects that solely involve the touring of existing work cannot be applied for under the Music Project Award. There is a separate touring award offered by the Arts Council. Further information is provided on the funding page of the Arts Council's website. The final thing in relation to activities that is very important to note is that you cannot apply for activities that the Arts Council has already assessed unless you can demonstrate that you have developed your proposal significantly. So this will be activities already assessed under any Arts Council award. You must demonstrate that you've developed your proposal significantly from previously applying if you are to be considered eligible. The exception to this, however, is that if we've specifically recommended that you redirect your application to the Music Project Award. However, please note that this recommendation is not an indication that the application will receive funding. Now, to a very important part of this presentation, which relates to supporting documentation. So you must include supporting materials with your application in addition to your application form. These materials will help the person assessing your application to get a clearer understanding of your proposal. If you do not upload supporting materials, your application is incomplete and we cannot assess it. The key thing to note here is that missing supporting materials is the most common reason for ineligible applications. So it is absolutely vital that you familiarise yourself with the supporting documentation that you are required to submit, and you make sure that you upload it online with your application form. So there are mandatory supporting documents for all applicants to the Music Project Award. There are 5. So I'm going to go through them here because it's very important that you understand exactly what's required in each of these 5 documents. First of all, you must provide a detailed spreadsheet budget which sets out the proposed income and expenditure for the project. This must be a separate and more detailed document to the summary budget information provided in the application form and must be provided in spreadsheet form to facilitate analysis. Secondly, you must provide a separate detailed up-to-date CV, maximum of 3 pages, for the applicant with a clear description of their area of artistic practice and track record. Please note that if you are an organisation making an application, you need to submit a profile of the organisation in place of a CV. Thirdly, you must complete an audience public engagement projection template, which must be downloaded from the Music Project Award webpage. So this is in a specific template, which is to enable you to complete details of your audience estimates and your public engagement projections. Because you need to remember that the Music Project Award, the ultimate outcome is bringing work to the public. The 4th piece of documentation is a marketing and/or engagement plan that outlines who the work is for and how they will be encouraged to engage with it. This must be separate to and in addition to the public engagement projection template. So just to clarify in terms of these 2 pieces of documentation, firstly, the audience public engagement projection template is essentially figures, estimates that you will put into the various categories for your audience engagement. The marketing and/or engagement plan, however, is a more detailed document that will actually set out your plan for marketing and for reaching your public and your audience in your engagement strategy. So it doesn't need to be in a particular format, but it must be a separate document which is separate to and in addition to the public engagement template. And finally, you must provide samples demonstrating previous work that is relevant to your proposed project, up to a maximum of 5 samples in total. These samples must include good quality sound recordings and/or audio-visual files and/or links to audio-visual samples. It should be noted that for composers applying to the award who routinely produce scores, they can submit a maximum of 3 scores or substantial score extracts. However, these scores must be in a PDF format and they must be in addition to the audio-visual files that you provide. So please note that you must provide audio-visual samples. If you are also providing scores, they must be in addition to the audio samples that you provide. And here is the critical thing in relation to these documents. An application that does not include all mandatory supporting material is ineligible and will not be assessed. So, the previous 5 pieces of documentation are mandatory. In other words, they must be submitted with your application. However, you can submit some additional supporting material. So where your proposal relies on the expertise of other people or organisations, you should submit up-to-date CVs or biographies, again to a maximum of 3 pages for each of the key artists involved in the proposed project, and letters, emails of support, and/or copies of MOUs from any key participants, collaborators, or organisational partners involved in the project, confirming their participation, outlining the nature of collaborations, and, where relevant, confirming any commitments of income either in cash or in kind towards the proposal. And again, please note, This additional supporting material is not mandatory. In other words, if you do not provide this information, your application will not be deemed ineligible. However, provision of this additional material will strengthen your proposal and will help in the assessment process. As well as knowing what supporting material you must provide or you can provide in the case of additional material, it's also critical that you understand the formats that you need to upload your documentation in. Please make sure that you consult Section 2.6 of the guidelines, which gives details on preparing your supporting materials. And please also consult Section 2.7, which is preparing your URL links for the instruction on file formats and URL links that we do and do not accept. And this is especially relevant for sharing work samples. So as I explained at the very beginning of the presentation, a change has been made where we will no longer accept links that limit subscription, be it financial or non-financial. And for example, we no longer accept links to Spotify. So please do ensure that you are familiar and that you read the guidelines in terms of the formats that we will or will not accept. So eligibility. There is a separate section in the guidelines, section 1.1, which is eligibility applications that we won't accept. This section provides a comprehensive list of the criteria under which your application will be screened for eligibility to the Music Project Award. So do spend time looking at this section because it is a critical section so that you know in which cases your application will be deemed ineligible to this round of the award. However, if your application is ineligible, we will not assess it. In that case, you may be able to apply again with the same proposal to a future funding round if you are able to address the issues that made your application ineligible and depending on the reason for ineligibility. So, for example, if you had an application that did not meet the objectives of the award, if it was more suited to another award offered by the Arts Council, and it was made ineligible to the Music Project Award, well, you will not be able to apply again to the Music Project Award for the same proposal because the reason for eligibility will remain the same. However, if it's a case that your application is made ineligible for not providing a piece of mandatory supporting documentation, for example, you will be able to to apply again with the proposal once you have addressed that eligibility issue and you upload the missing mandatory documentation from your previous submission. So how to apply? A number of key steps here just to give you a little bit of a sense of the application process. Firstly, if you're applying to the Arts Council for the first time, you will need to register for an online services account. You will be given a unique ARN number to log into your account. However, this process can take up to 5 days. So please make sure if you are registering for the first time that you do this well in advance of the application deadline. Once you have an online services account, you will be able to download an application form for the award you wish to apply for, in this case, for the Music Project Award. Once downloaded, you complete your application form and prepare the supporting documentation and the uploads. When you are ready, you can then submit your application through online services. Please note that in making an application, the application can only be made online. So your application form and all supporting documents must be submitted online to complete your application. Comprehensive guidance on this process can be found on the Arts Council's website under the Guidance for Applicants section on the Apply for Funding page webpage. This will give you details on the application process, relevant guidance. It'll also give you contact details for our colleagues who will be able to support you in the process. So after you apply, what happens next? Well, first of all, once you make your application online, your application is acknowledged by the Arts Council. Secondly, it is going to be checked for eligibility. If it is eligible on the basis of the eligibility criteria, it will proceed to the assessment stage. Following assessment by the Artform team, applications will be either not shortlisted or shortlisted for the final stage, which is the peer panel review. Overall funding decisions are announced within 12 to 15 weeks of the application deadline. However, this is a guide only. The time frame will depend on the volume of applications that we receive in the round. Once the decisions have been issued, you will be able to request your assessment by contacting the music team directly. Just some information on the assessment criteria, and you will find further information in the guidelines in section 5.2. Any applications that are eligible for assessment are assessed on the basis of 3 criteria. The first is the artistic quality evidenced in your application. So our assessment of artistic quality focuses on your previous practice as an artist and of those involved in the project, as well as on the nature of the proposal. The second criteria is meeting the objectives and priorities of the award. We assess applications on how well the proposal meets the objectives and priorities of the award. And as I have already mentioned, please see section 1.1 of the guidelines, objectives of the award, which gives you more information on what the objectives and priorities are. And finally, we assess on the basis of feasibility. So we assess the feasibility of your application based on how you demonstrate your capacity to deliver your proposed activities. I would strongly recommend that you do consult section 5.2 of the guidelines, because it'll give you more prompts under each of those criteria in terms of what the assessor will be looking for in proposals, and that will help you to consider these elements of assessment when you are preparing your application. So a few tips just to kind of round off the presentation for you. First of all, as I have already stressed, please read the guidelines carefully. Do not assume you know them. Even if you've applied previously, as mentioned before, changes can be made from one round to another. So it is very, very important that you read the current guidelines carefully. Give yourself plenty of time and aim to submit before the deadline. It is very important that you do give yourself time, because we may not be able to support you should you encounter any issues if you're very close to the submission deadline, which, just to remind you again, is 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 23rd of July. Make sure that you're eligible and that you're applying to the right award for your proposal. Do contact the music and opera team in advance if you're unsure. While we will not be able to advise on the specifics of your proposal, we will certainly give you general guidance and help you to determine if you are applying to the correct award. Prepare and upload your supporting material and in the correct formats. Do remember that this is a very competitive award, so do not assume that those assessing your applications will know you when reading your application. Do make sure that you put in clear and comprehensive details on your practice and on your proposal, and on those who are also collaborating with you or involved in your proposal, if that is the case. And finally, we do suggest that you ask your peers or somebody that you know to read over and check your application prior to submitting, because they can also bring a objective perspective to your application and will be able to assist if there is anything that they feel is unclear in relation to the questions or the sections that you need to complete. Some useful resources and contacts for you. First of all, the Arts Council website gives guidance for applicants, as I explained previously. It also gives you some additional information on disability access supports that you can request funding for. A frequently asked questions section on our overall funding processes, and the 2026 funding schedule. We would also recommend that you sign up to the Arts Council newsletter, and this will give you regular bulletins around upcoming funding schemes and other information that you may find of interest. You can do that on the website via the sign up button on the homepage. Also, we recommend you check our social media regularly for posts that will be uploaded there in relation to funding and other Arts Council activities. There are also online information clinics uploaded to our YouTube channel. And you see the URL there for the YouTube channel. Any technical queries should be addressed to our colleagues at onlineservices@artscouncil.ie. And any questions in relation to disability access or costs that you can request for access should be directed to the Access Officer at disabilityaccess@artscouncil.ie. These email addresses are also available in the guidelines document and on the Arts Council's website. If you have any queries or questions specifically around the Music Project Award, or indeed any other music or opera awards that are offered, do please contact us in the Music and Opera team. So the email address is musicandopera@artscouncil.ie, where my colleagues Isis Cortez, Anya Kelly, the Assistant and Music and Opera Officer, myself and my colleague Maeve Kelly, who are the support managers in Music and Opera, and James Bingham, who's the head of Music and Opera. We are all available there to help you if you've any queries on the guidelines, eligibility criteria, or technical aspects of your application. Please do reach out to us before you make an application should you have any queries that we may be able to help you with. And finally, thank you very much for listening and for attending this presentation. I do hope that it has been of help, just in clarifying the key points in relation to the Music Project 2027 Award. And should you wish to make an application, you do know where to come for additional guidance. And I wish you all the very best.